My leadership strategy is make me a promise and then keep it. And if you can't make me a promise, then you're asking me to manage you, and I can't help you. I can describe where I think we're going. And then I need volunteers, whether you're getting paid or not. I need volunteers to show up and say, this part of where we're going, I'll take that. I'm on the hook for that. Early on, I started one of the first internet companies. We were hiring 1 or 2 people a week. And I was making the mistake that so many people make. I was hiring people of a similar social privileged background. I was hiring people I wanted to have lunch with. I was hiring people like I was dating. And in fact, what we know is there are no all tuba orchestras. The diversity in an orchestra makes it work. And the same thing is true for every institution.
Seth, it's great to have you back on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for showing up and making a difference for so many people.
Thank you, man. And I'm curious, why is the best part of a knock-knock joke the pause after someone says, "Who's there"?
It's the only part of a knock-knock joke. The thing is that tension is not the same as stress. Tension is the thing we seek out in our life, the moment just before something works, the anticipation, the excitement, the fear, all of those things wrapped in one. And nobody would play golf, and no one would go surfing, and no one would go to the movies, and no one would have a conversation if they knew exactly what was going to come next. And so the entire setup of a knock-knock joke is the same every single time. And only after we hear the first part, then there's that pause. That's why we did it.
Do you like stand-up comedy?
I used to. I find that there's a lot of shortcuts that people who are trying to work something out for themselves that might be better off with a therapist are doing on stage that I don't need to be part of. I think that artful, clever, thoughtful stand-up that says, I'm going to live with the constraints that are right here in front of me, right? I'm not going to smash a watermelon, and I'm not going to use props, but I'm just going to use words and a microphone to create and relieve tension in a way that resonates with people. Stephen Wright, I mean, sign me up. I could listen to Stephen Wright all day.
What's funny is when they state the obvious in a way that you aren't able to put into words, as well as the use of tension and then surprise. And I feel like that's something you've done your whole career. At least, I mean, I've been reading you for a long time, and I feel like I wonder if Seth gets some of that from watching people do stand-up.
I certainly respect it. I mean, I used to work at a fire hydrant factory, and the problem was you couldn't park anywhere near the place. And that was a joke. Sorry, stolen from Stephen Wright, word for word.
I was like, hold on a second. Okay, sorry.
But because it wasn't in context, you weren't ready for it, and so it flew by because there was not an expectation that tension was going to be presented. I find that people learn always on their own. The only learning is autodidact learning, and that what teachers do is create the conditions for people to get to where they seek to go. And I think the same thing is true for important work, that important work is significant work. And if your boss tells you every step, every motion has a stopwatch, is counting every keystroke, they're going to have turnover, they're going to have discontent, and they're going to get lousy work. But if they create the conditions for you to do the work, for you to figure out how to solve the interesting problem, then both sides benefit more than just a paycheck.
This is a side note, but I've recorded with you a handful of times over the past 8 years, and you're always early. Every single time. Every time. And for a guy like you that is doing a lot, I'd like to hear your philosophy on being not only on time, but being early.
Well, I think the first thing to make clear is that while it may appear that I do a lot, there are so many things that I don't do that I am apparently significantly less busy than most people you know. And clearing out the stuff that's mediocre, that's stuff that other people could do, not managing a single soul, not watching television, not going to meetings. I have 6, 7, 8 hours free a day that other people don't have. So that's the first part. And then the second part is when we think about the fact that everyone gets the same 24 hours in a day, you can either, from an early age, establish a pattern of always being a little late and always apologizing, or leaving out one thing that you did when you were 7 years old and always being 5 minutes early, making it easier for everybody from now on. And I know people who are stuck in the late cycle, and I view that as something that isn't intended to be selfish, but feels selfish, because you're showing up late because it was easier for you, but you just made it harder for everybody else. And so I have tried to offer people respect and dignity with my work. And a small version of that is be 60 seconds early. It doesn't cost that much.
What advice do you give to the leader who works at a big company, who has lots of people who report to them, who is back to back to back, who is always late? Seth, I bring this up as a personal pet peeve of mine. I like to be early. It was trained in me from a very young age from both my parents and then football coaches. So it's kind of a thing of I design every day so that I can be early to every meeting with intention to show respect. I think being prompt and being on time is how you show respect to people. But I also understand that world that I don't live in of the Fortune 500 senior VP of whatever, back to back to back. Sounds terrible, but I get it. And a lot of them listen to the show, so no offense. What advice do you give to
I
those?
I am eager to offend these people because they have no right to be offended.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So I need a whole section of the new book is about meetings. Not because it's a pet peeve of mine, though it is. Peeves make lousy pets, by the way, but because it's a symptom of what I'm talking about. Toby, who is a friend who runs Shopify, is also a programmer, and he had 10,000 employees or so, and he went into their systems and he wrote a little script that canceled every recurring meeting in the company for every employee. And then he wrote everyone a note, and he said, all those recurring meetings have just been canceled. If they were really important, you can go ahead and start them up again, but you need everyone to agree that they were important. And he just earned his company, 40,000 hours, 60,000 hours a week back. So what I would say to these super busy executives is, number one, there are people who are running companies with 100,000 employees. There are people who are running countries who don't go to as many meetings as you. Clearly, it can be done. Number two, are you going to meetings so that you can lecture to people, so you can transmit information? If so, you are wasting everyone's time. You should be sending a memo, a video memo, a typed memo, a voice memo. Let people listen to it asynchronously. Let them speed it up if they want. Let them read it twice. But if it isn't actually interactive, what you're really doing is you're taking attendance and you're reasserting your power and authority as a manager. And at your level, you shouldn't need to do that. That's not your job. Your job is to make decisions. Your job is not to reestablish your power in the old industrial management system. And then the third thing is, if you still insist on doing this, please make every meeting 7 minutes shorter, just by default. Because guess what? It will still get done. Mm-hmm. And if you have 6 meetings a day and you take 7 minutes out of each one of those meetings and you just save 42 minutes, number one, you'll never be late. And number two, in those 42 minutes, maybe you could catch your breath and make a better decision.
In the new book, The Song of Significance, you wrote, when you race to the bottom, you see people as resources, not as people. And this made me think of the term that I hear when I speak with leaders sometimes when they call people capital management or just human capital. And I would say, you mean people? And it's a weird thing, but this is like that management versus leadership part. So can you dig deeper into how management doesn't just exist? It was actually invented, which you go deep on again in the book, and I highly suggest people read that. There's a lot to it, about why management was created and then why leadership is so important.
So these people are telling you the truth. And so I give them points for being honest. Frederick Taylor met Henry Ford, and something extraordinary happened, which is the stopwatch met the assembly line.
Yep.
And what industrialism did was it made us all rich. That every single person listening to this has more power and assets than the last king of France did. That we changed public school, we changed healthcare, we changed the environment, we changed everything in the world to make industrialists happy, because industrialists paid us handsomely to do so. And where industrialism began was, here's a machine. I can tweak this machine to make it more productive. If I have more productive machines than you, I will make more money than you, and I can buy more machines. And so the price of a Model T Ford was 1/4 the price of any other car you could buy. But then Frederick Taylor said, you know what? People are machines too. And that's where we get the term jerk, because you can jerk people around like a marionette on the assembly line and measure every single movement that they make. Well, if people are machines, let's call them human resources. So if you have a human resources department in your company, you've already acknowledged what you are doing. You are managing people for productivity. And I got to tell you, it worked for a really long time. But now that we have ChatGPT and outsourcing, now that we have AI, now that we have so many high-paid jobs that can be done cheaper, the people you've got, the people you're paying well, you aren't really a resource anymore. You're a person. And what we need you to do is make decisions and lead, because stopwatches and management, while they still exist, aren't the driver for better.
All big companies have HR. Do you think they should change this? Do you think they should revamp it, rebuild it, call it something else? What do you think of a lot of HR people work in HR, or they do it for legal reasons? There's a lot of reasons to have it. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm not sure changing the name will change anything. The
Right.
point I'm making is the attitude of the way to get better is to get bigger, and the way to get bigger is to make every job as small a piece as we can and to slot people in. The org chart has square boxes on it because that's a symbol that we can, it's not a jigsaw puzzle, it's a square box. We put anybody in that box. The resume that proves that you fit in more, right? So there will always be these vast enterprises that are treating people that way. But most of the change that's happening, most of the value that's being created, is being created by groups of teams that are dancing with each other, not dictating what to do tomorrow. And I learned so much in leading as a volunteer. The Carbon Almanac, a book I spent over a year of my life on with 300 people in 40 countries. Every one of us was a volunteer. We wrote, edited, designed, laid out, and published a 97,000 word, 300-page almanac with not one significant error in 5 months. How did we do that? Right? We didn't do it because we had any human resources. We did it because a bunch of people came together and said, we can exchange ideas and make decisions, produce value, and ship work because we want to, not because someone's telling us every step involved along the way. And I'll compare that to a podcast that I recorded in March. It's a 20-minute podcast, and it took me 14 minutes to produce. How could that be? Well, I asked ChatGPT 5 questions. I copied its answers into 11 Labs, which had trained an AI in my voice. And it read me asking and answering the questions in a voice that my wife could not tell was actually me. And I sent it to my producer, and it was done. So if that's my job, I've got big trouble, because now a computer can produce a podcast that sounds just like me in less time than I could possibly even read it. So we've got to think about, what are we going to do to create value in a world like that? Because if someone can write down what you need to do and enforce your compliance, they can find someone cheaper than you to do it.
I think we need leaders, and we need to hire great leaders. We need to promote them and support them and develop them. And I was reading in your book about one of the ways you would measure this is to see what happened with the people they've led, and then see what happened with the people that they've led right on down the chain. I know people don't report to you, but you are working with lots of leaders. You've built amazing businesses over the course of your career, right? You're working on projects all the time. What do you think is some of the greatest ways to make hiring decisions for people in leadership roles?
So my leadership strategy, I'm a terrible, terrible manager. My leadership strategy is make me a promise and then keep it. And if you can't make me a promise, then you're asking me to manage you, and I can't help you. I can describe where I think we're going, and then I need volunteers, whether you're getting paid or not. I need volunteers to show up and say, this part of where we're going, I'll take that. I'm on the hook for that. And how I have learned to hire over the years has shifted. Early on, I started one of the first internet companies. We were hiring 1 or 2 people a week. I was hiring 1 or 2 people a week every week for a long time. And I was making the mistake that so many people make. I was hiring people of a similar social privileged background. I was hiring people I wanted to have lunch with. I was hiring people like I was dating. And in fact, what we know is there are no all tuba orchestras because they sound terrible. You need clarinets and violins, and the diversity in an orchestra makes it work. And the same thing is true for every institution. And so now I have a very permeable model that says, when I'm doing a project, I am totally open to anybody showing up and making a contribution, but I will not hire anybody unless I've worked with them before. Because whether you're good at interviewing is irrelevant to me. What's relevant is, did we dance before and you were good at dancing? And I think that many organizations would benefit by hiring promiscuously freelancers to work on projects for a day, a week, an hour, pay them. And if they do the kinds of things you need done, regardless of whether they have, neurotypical behavior, whether they stutter, whatever it is, just say, I needed this done. They made a promise. It got done. I'll let them do it again. Because then what you end up with is a team of people who know how to do it. And I know you played football, and for all the challenges that football has, one of the things they do right is the best way to get on a football team is to show them you know how to play football.
Well, it made me think of two. I was very lucky to come to New York City and hang out with Brian Koppelman. I know one of your good friends for half a day, and we actually sat and recorded next to the room where the writers for the TV show Billions, which you've also been on, right? And I said, hey, man, how do you pick that team? How do you make those decisions? That fascinates me. And he went on, but a lot of it, he said, was we rely heavily on referrals from people we trust. What do you think about that?
I think it makes perfect sense if you trust the right people.
Yeah.
The worst person I hired unseen because someone I really trusted said, you have to hire this person immediately. Yeah. And it was a disaster. Oof. And so the lesson is not that you shouldn't trust people to make recommendations. It's that you should trust the right people to make recommendations. I trusted this person because he was good at something completely unrelated to referring workers to me.
I love the story about the guy who built Kinko's. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. His first name is Paul Orfalli.
Close. Paul Orfalli.
Orfalli.
Paul and I worked together a long time ago on a Kinko's book that never got published.
Oh.
And Paul proudly talks about his dyslexia. He's virtually illiterate. And he started a copy shop on a campus of a school in California when he was in college. The room was so small, they had to roll the copy machine outside to have enough room to open for the day. And this one little copy shop grew and grew and grew. He ended up selling it to FedEx for billions of dollars. And Paul would happily tell you the secret of his success, which is he spent most of his time on the road, and he would visit a Kinko's. He'd walk in and he'd say, "What's working?" And if the person behind the counter didn't have a story to tell him of something they had done that was innovative at that Kinko's, they were in trouble. So everyone was always looking for a new thing to tell Paul that they had tried that was working. And then he would go to all the other stores and teach them what was working in that store. And this method of hundreds of people working as hard as they could to innovate, to be human, to show up in front of the customer, not have a manual in their hand, built a multi-billion-dollar company run by someone who's functionally illiterate. And it's not just about being in the copy business. We see that in just about every human endeavor, that being a human is amazingly, beautifully, and ironically more important now than it was before we invented machines.
Well, to me, that I love that story because he's shining a bright light on what he values and living out those values. We value innovation. We value trying something new. I would guess if you told the further story that there are probably times when he told that somebody tried something and it didn't work, which is okay. The only way to innovate and to get creative and to get new things into the world is to try, is to actually do it, ship the work, as you would say. And I think that's something that all leaders should think about, is that this Paul, this guy who, as you said, had his own issues to deal with, was on the front lines, asking questions, leading with curiosity, and then just sharing what he learned. I mean, it's amazing. And he sold it for $2 billion just from FedEx. It's wild.
Right. And the other thing is, I brought up with him, and of course you tell people what isn't working. He said, nope, didn't do that. He didn't want to know. And the reason he didn't want to know and he didn't want to tell the other people is he would probably lose something in translation. Yeah. Right. So a store would open on Sunday and wouldn't do very well. So he'd go tell the next store, that store opened on Sunday, didn't do very well. And so they wouldn't open on Sunday. But maybe there was something about the way the first store opened on Sunday that was different than the way the second store was going to open on Sunday. And it was cheaper to make the same mistake a few times than it was to not try to innovate.
Love it. Mahan Khalsa, man, some of these names are hard. He or she, I'm not even sure actually, breakthrough book on selling, has a message for every manager. We shouldn't be doing manager to our employees. If we're good, we're doing it, quote, with them. Maybe you can properly pronounce that name and let me know that it's not doing to them, it's doing with them.
Right. So Manan Khosla wrote what I think of as the best B2B selling book ever, called Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play. And if it wasn't called Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play, it would be the title of my book. And my book is not about B2B selling, but I love the title. And what the book argues is, if you're selling a complicated, expensive item, the best way to succeed is to eliminate almost all prospects early in the process. To say, look, if you're just shopping around, if this is just an RFP, if you're just trying to please your boss, but you're not going to buy anything, I'm really busy. But if you're ready to dance and want to learn a lot and want to go on this journey with me, I'm not going to push against you. But if you want to sit on this side of the table, let's together figure out what your problem is with your bakery machinery. Let's figure out together what your problem is with your systems. And if we solve it, let's agree that you'll buy something. Because if you're not ready to do that, I'm too talented to argue with you or to try to cajole you. That's not my job as a B2B salesperson. My job is to figure out what your problem is and solve it for you. Let's get real or let's not play. And the reason that expression is so important is it is possible to be a barista and find enormous satisfaction in your work. It is possible to be a nurse at the Aravind Eye Hospital in Bangalore and get enormous satisfaction from your work. But let's get real about why you're here, right? So the deal in the warehouse at Amazon is we're going to pay you as little as we possibly can and get you to do as much as we can. If that's what you want, come here. And the reason that they have so much overhead is that's not what people want. And they think there must be something more to it than that, but there isn't, so they leave. But if I can look you in the eye and say, what we do around here is dance in the liminal space between today and tomorrow. What we do around here is talk to each other quite directly, criticizing the work, never the worker. What we do around here is make decisions. If that's what you want, this is the place. But don't come here because you get to wear a nice outfit and we have free coffee, because that's not what we do.
What do you think of bees?
I love all the bee stories in this book, and I left out so many of them because I didn't think I could get away with writing an entire book about colonies of bees.
You probably could.
So,
I mean,
well, I don't
Seth
think I
Godin
could
could.
get away with selling a book on that topic. I know
Yeah,
I
you could
could write
write.
a book on that topic.
Anyway, yeah.
I met a woman named Jacqueline Freeman, who is a feral beekeeper. She's not feral, the bees are feral. The the regime of big honey in this country is scary indeed, because the same thing we've done to cows, we've done to bees. And basically, a bee colony, a beehive, is a human brain turned inside out. That each bee is a neuron. That if one bee dies, and bees die all the time, they only live 3 weeks, which I didn't know. If one bee dies, the hive continues. And regularly, bees will sacrifice themselves. Bees will make different decisions on behalf of the hive. And also, interesting, the hive is led without a leader, organized without an organizer. The queen is not in charge at all. And that's the same way our brain works. And it's the same way organizations can work. That when we create a culture, what we're doing inside an organization is saying, this is the way things are around here. And so if you tolerate a bully because she's number one in sales, you've made a really clear statement to everyone in the company, which is it's okay to be a bully as long as you're very productive. On the other hand, if the first time someone acts like a bully, you fire them regardless of their financial contribution, you've made it really clear what it's like around here. And the magic that we can learn from the hives goes into so many of these details at a beautiful metaphorical level. You know, I tell the story in the book of the Song of Increase, and I got the title of the Song of Significance by riffing on the Song of Increase. But when we think about how do the bees, when they leave the hive, find a new place to live? This is a great example. So they have 72 hours after they swarm. This is a feral hive, 72 hours to find a new place to live, or they're all going to die. So we're talking about 15,000 bees singing the song of safety in a tight ball on a tree. What they do is they appoint about 300 scout bees, and they're able to cover 30 square miles of territory. And they each fly out and find or look to find a hole in a tree or something in the eaves of an attic or a house. And each scout bee can only inspect 5 or 10 spots because bees don't go that fast. And they come back to the hive and they do a dance in front of all the other bees. And the dance includes 2 pieces of information. And none of this is theory. This is easy to prove. The experiments, we could talk about that all day long about how they proved it. But the vigor of the dance tells the other bees how excited this particular scout is about a particular spot they found. And the angle of the dance shows to a 1/10 of a degree compass point exactly where this spot is and how far away it is from the hive. If a scout is really excited, they will send 3 more scouts to that spot. And those scouts will come back and report. Now, what's really interesting about this is all the scout bees are less than 4 weeks old. None of the scout bees have ever scouted before. So the culture of the hive is that the scouts understand what a good spot is going to be, but no one's in charge of supervising this. Now what happens is there's a bunch of contenders for where they should move to, but no bee, not one bee, has visited all of the leading contenders. And then the hive has a vote and they unanimously choose which place to go. They have a debate, but then they all agree because if they don't agree, the hive is going to die anyway. They have to agree. This all happens in the matter of an hour. And then, with no warning, 15,000 bees and the queen will just leave and, like lightning, head straight for the place they picked and move in. And they're almost always right. They don't always pick the single best spot if we go out and measure all their options, but they almost always pick a spot that is good enough. And when we think about how that hive does it, the queen didn't tell him what to do. The council of maidens didn't tell him what to do. It's an organization without an organizer. And we're seeing that that's how WordPress works. We're seeing that's how so many cultural shifts happen on the internet. We're seeing that's how podcasting works, right? You didn't invent podcasting, Ryan. I know the guy who invented podcasting. And yet podcasts sound like podcasts. How did that happen? Organized without an organizer.
How does that work, though, for there's CEOs and there's senior execs, and they give up, like Matt Mullenweg at WordPress, he gives the state of the word. He gives speeches. He gives town halls. People know he's the founder and CEO. He's awesome, right? And there are lots of places, all places are pretty much like that. So what do you mean by organized? They organize it without an organizer. In a way, when I look at WordPress or Automatic, I do think of Matt Mullenweg, who's their CEO. I think of senior leaders and how they kind of set the vision and they give the town hall updates. What do you mean by this without, like, it almost feels like a leaderless organization, or maybe I'm reading it wrong.
The managerless organization, not a leaderless organization. The manager takes attendance. The manager issues edicts. The manager makes sure that the fry cook at McDonald's number 742 is on the fry machine at 2:00 in the afternoon. I had breakfast with Matt a few weeks ago. Matt has more than 2,000 employees. They have no office. And their employees he's never met. There are other employees he talks to regularly, but Matt doesn't get to tell anybody precisely what to do tomorrow. His job is to create the conditions for the culture of Automatic. His job, yes, he's the guy who decided to buy Tumblr on a whim because it was on a discount, right? So then he shows up to his people and says, all right, we just bought this for $3 million. What should we do with it? Figure this out, figure this out, figure this out. And creating the conditions for forward motion is how we create the future. My friend Ben Zander says that the conductor is the only person in the orchestra who doesn't make a sound. And yet when the orchestra does a great performance, they're the one that gets all the applause. What did they do? Well, they made sure they were playing the right music. They made sure that they had the right people in the seats. They made sure that practice was going well. They set standards for people. But during the performance, they didn't play the trumpet. Somebody else played the trumpet. And this mindset of being really clear, when are you going to wear your manager hat and when are you going to wear your leader hat, is so critical. But we have conflated the two. They have nothing to do with each other.
You talk a lot about Tom Peters. I had Tom on the show, and Tom kind of argued with me, like, management and leadership, what's the difference? It's the same thing. And maybe you've argued with him about this. You're on the other end of the spectrum, right? They're completely different things. So how does that compute when you and Tom talk? Okay,
so I love Tom. And I used to do such a good Tom Peters imitation. I should practice again.
Go for it.
No, I can't. No way I'm doing it on demand. What Tom means is this: all that matters is excellence, period. I don't care what your job title is. I don't care if you're the person who brings out the saucer to the customer at the end of the evening or the person who wrote the check for the restaurant. If you're going to show up as a human to create change, better make it damn good. That's why he's saying, I don't want to have a semantic conversation about managers and leaders. What I am adding to the conversation is lots of people are in a culture where they feel trapped. Lots of people have been seduced by Milton Friedman's nonsense about maximizing shareholder value. Lots of people are surrounded by folks whose stock options will go up or down based on something they do. They're under cultural pressure. And in those settings, we often resort to solving today's problems instead of thinking about why we're here in the first place. And the purpose of my distinction is to say, if you're going to manage, please be good at it. I really like the fact that the Metro North train comes exactly when they say it's going to come. That was a management activity, that there was a bunch of people involved in making sure that the 10:01 gets here at 10:01. We need that. But don't think that then you're a leader, because you're not. You're just a boss. Mm-hmm. And I want to empower people who don't have any direct reports, like me, to lead. Because, you on this show, showing up regularly, you're leading. You're leading by choosing who your guests are. You're leading by asking certain questions, but not other questions. You're leading by what you shine a light on. You don't have any authority, but you have the privilege of narrating for people who are giving you permission. So I want to give people the option to choose whether they want to lead or not. Whereas Tom's argument is, if you're breathing, you're a leader.
I emailed you 8.5 years ago, and I said, Seth, will you please come on my new podcast? Just getting started. I'd love to have you. In a way, you're one of my heroes, right? I read everything you'd written up to that point, blog, books, everything. And you wrote me back and you said, follow up when you've had 75 episodes and this is a big, awesome show, something along those lines, right? I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what it was. And I remember I put it on my calendar for when that episode would come out to follow up. And in a way, I share the story because it's a form of leadership. Kevin Kelly says, give people a reputation to live up to. I know Kevin's one of your friends too. In a way, you set this kind of mark for me to hit 8.5 years ago to say, email me then. And I did on that day. You responded that day, and we scheduled the first time we talked on that very day. And I share it because that's leadership. That is inspiring somebody to go for something and to do it. And in a way, I needed it. And I want to encourage other people by sharing this real, true story that happened between us, because I'm not saying I wouldn't have kept going without it, but man, it was a good day. When I saw that, I'm like, I have like something out there I'm shooting towards, like in a way, a North Star. And so there are so many different ways to lead. And that's just one example. And I imagine you obviously don't remember because you do that for everybody. That's just the type of guy you are. And I think that is something to be noted when it comes to leadership.
Well, thank you. I actually don't do it for everybody, and I can't. Regularly, people say, I heard you on some podcast and someone said you have this deal that if we do 100, I did 100. Well, I'm not an ATM, right? An ATM is like making you a certain promise. And anytime you walk up with the card, you can take out money, right? I'm showing up to say, if there is a glimmer in someone's eye, if I have a chance to leverage my work by helping somebody do something better in lots and lots of different ways that doesn't involve me being a podcast ATM machine, then I work to do it. I find that is gratifying and a key part of the way I have chosen to be in the world. But there are other people, like my friend Keller Williams, the musician. He's on the road 300 days a year performing concerts. He'll perform for 10 people. He'll perform for 500 people. He's shining lights in a totally different way, right? And Keller could have a much easier life if he just stayed at his home studio and broadcast the stuff to the whole world. But he has come to the conclusion that magic happens when people are singing and dancing in the same room. And all I know is we have a chance to sing a song before we pass. And the song of industrialism has worn itself out. And it has poisoned our planet, and it has divided us, and it has amplified caste, and it has made us all rich at the same time that it has enervated so many people. And I'm just trying to help people sing a different song, the way you sing it on your podcast, and the way Sean Askinosie sings it, the way he makes chocolate. It's all the same thing.
What's Kokoro, if I'm pronouncing that right?
If you might be. There are certain Japanese terms that really resonate with me. Otaku is something that I wrote about in Purple Cow. And Kokoro is an ideogram, first from the Chinese, which is a house and a heart. And what it says is you can do a job or you can do something where you bring yourself to work. That doesn't mean your true self being judged as whether you're a good human or not, but where you are fully present. And we've all had that moment where we knew we were doing what we needed to do in a moment and we were getting paid for it. And what a magical thing that is, that we can support our families and live the life we want to live and do work for other people and feel present when we do it. That wasn't true when we were ditch diggers. There were very few people who looked forward to digging a ditch in the hot sun. But now lots of us work indoors and lots of us are facing this frontier. And it's easy to look at AI and wring our hands and say, what are we going to do? But it's also easy to look at it and say, great, I don't have to write mediocre copy for mediocre websites anymore because I can just tell a computer to do it. So I better go find something useful to do because the computer just figured out how to do my bad job.
You have this beautiful 2x2 that I'd love for you to go a little bit deeper on here for a second of surveillance, significance, impersonal, and comfort, right? Low trust, low stakes, high stakes. Can you go deeper on that?
If we are dealing with something that's super important and critical, and we don't trust the people who are doing it, we have to put surveillance in place. So banks put all their employees under surveillance at all times. You don't just get to be in the room with the money and come and go, right? In another corner are fairly low stakes things with people we do trust. And this is what happens when you walk in to the corner coffee shop. You are treated with a smile. If you forgot your money, don't worry, you can pay me tomorrow. You see that person every single day. They may not be your best friend, but community comes from that. And then there are two other quadrants, right? There's the quadrant of when we use surveillance just because we're too lazy or cheap to do anything but that. And this is the mindset of AI and call centers and all that other stuff. And then there's the magic quadrant of high stakes work with people we trust. And so if you need open heart surgery, you're going to get it from somebody who comes to you with enough of a reputation that they don't have to be under surveillance while they are doing their work. And it's in that corner that so much magic lies, or in the corner of doing the work of fueling a community. And I think what we have to do as people who have the option is walk away from any job where we are under surveillance. That those jobs might have to exist, but they don't have to be done by you.
An effective coach that you quote is named Joe Hudson. I believe he's a Silicon Valley business coach, and it's primarily you highlight his use of questions, how and what. I think probably all of us leaders would be better if we became more curious and asked better questions. And that's probably why he's an effective coach. I don't know Joe, but if you're writing about him, I'm guessing he's really good. What is it about the questions he uses that makes him so effective?
I confess I've never met him either. What I find interesting about coaching is the enrollment that the coached person brings to the table. Coaches have to be leaders because they can't have any authority over you. You hired them because you want to get better. And that works in sports, but it also works in the kind of executive coaching we're talking about. And the reason that I quoted his questions in the book is that when we get back to this idea of make a promise and keep it, when someone is having trouble keeping the promise, we can try to use our authority to beat them up so that they'll try harder to keep the promise. Or we can just ask some questions that help them understand where they might be holding back, where they might be stuck, how to get back to design thinking and who's it for and what's it for, what are the tools that are available to us to keep this promise. Now, it might be an unkeepable promise, in which case we owe it to everybody to say, that thing I said we could do, we can't do it. But if it is a keepable promise, let's figure out what's not matching. Let's get real, or let's not play. And there are lots of coaches, Michael Bungay Stanier's books are so good in this, about the regime that we can create that are simply about asking ourselves things. What am I afraid of? Why am I holding back? What are my priorities? We could come up with a dozen right here. But the heart of it is, if you are enrolled in the journey, artists don't ask, when does the shift end? They say, how can I make more art? Industrial workers say, when does the shift end? How can I get away with a little bit less? Because they are surrounded by bosses who are trying to extract from them, as opposed to people who are shining a light and letting them be the people they want to be.
Yeah, the reward for the work is the opportunity to do more. Seth, one more question before we run. Let's say you're meeting with somebody who just graduated from college and they want to do good. They want to leave a dent in the world. You've worked with lots of these people. You've helped lots of these people. What are some general pieces of life/career advice you give to them?
Once someone has just graduated from college, they're probably significantly in debt, and they're eager to prove to people that they didn't make a mistake. And those two things are going to conspire to have them do exactly the wrong thing. To get picked by an institution that other people have heard of, to do a job where they're told what to do, because for 15 years they have done that. Will this be on the test? Tell me what to do. Give me an A. And so the most impactful thing I can do is say, find a gig where you will learn an enormous amount from somebody who trusts you enough to have you make mistakes in service of this learning. And if you are learning something every day, it doesn't need to be from a famous institution, and you don't have to get paid a lot. But you have to be able to say to me 6 months from now, look at all the ways I look at the world differently now because I was exposed to this. And that generally is the smallest project you can imagine. People send me a note, where do I go get a job? I want to be a marketer. And my answer is, go to some garage sales and figure out how to sell what you bought on eBay for 3 times what you paid. Do that. Figure out a charity you care about and go raise $50,000 for them. Don't ask for their permission. Just go raise $50,000 for them. Do that. If you do marketing for 6 months, you will be a better marketer than if you go to work for Pepsi.
So good. The book's called The Song of Significance. And much like the other books Seth has written, highly, highly recommended. It's so well done, both high level as well as practical, and done in a way that only Seth can do. So I really appreciate you publishing that book. I appreciate you being here, man, and I'd love to continue our dialogue as we both progress, man. We started 8.5 years ago, and here we are. It's pretty sweet, man.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate you.